Welcome to St. Mark's Chapel. This church, actually a log barn, was built in about 1844. It was located on the old Henry Weidner property, some 5 miles north of Hart Square, and moved here in 1982. It was donated to Hart Square by Alex and Nancy Shuford. It's been consecrated by Reverend William G. Weinhauer in 1984. Several of my grandchildren have been baptized here. There have been several weddings, even some during a big festival. The church sign that you see here is an original early church sign. We did put the St. Mark's Chapel where we had another church removed. Stained glass window located on the back of the church was found in an early church in Taylorsville, some 20-25 miles from here. This is one of two churches on our property. You see the one across the lake, Chapel of Peace. As we walk into the chapel itself, on the right you notice an early collection basket, rows of logs that have been hand cut in half, acting as benches or pews. The sign on the left that says St. Mark's Chapel actually is over 100 years old. It was not St. Mark's, it was another church, but I simply changed only the St. Mark's Chapel part of the sign. As you follow into the organ that you can see, it's a wagon organ, very small. Once it folds completely up, it would go on the back of a wagon. Now the organ itself has been here probably for close to 30 years. It's not been tuned, but the amazing thing is the temperature has ranged almost to 100 degrees, almost down to zero. The tone is still perfect. To hold the tune for 30 years is unbelievable. You know, today's organs, you got to retune them every year or two. The adjustable candlestick is 18th century, and it's adjustable for light and a candle, so the organ could be played in a dark setting or at night. In the early 1800s, you would have had a circuit rider, and he may have come to your community maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks. In between, you'd have some sort of lay reader conducting the services. The altar in front of you is over 100 years old. By chance, there was an antique dealer came in here with a truckload of early artifacts, and I'd looked for an altar for probably close to a year that would fit this particular church. And on the back of the truck, there was a beautiful little small early altar. Paschal candlestick is to the right, baptismal font also on the right, pewter chalices, and early hymnal boards on the back wall. One of the most interesting things about this particular building, as you know, in the early 1800s, a lot of places did not have actual churches, so they would use your house or barn, and this is actually a barn that we've converted into a little chapel. But the windows on the back side actually open up, exposing Hog Hill and the cross at the end of the lake. And an idea that I kept for some 40 years as a park ranger in Grand Teton National Park. There was a little church in Moran, Wyoming, where there was a window, and you sat back and the cross was in front of the window, and as you looked across the backside, the Grand Tetons snow-covered captured the scenery. So I cut this out, and certainly you probably wouldn't have found that in this particular area, but it stayed with me for 40 years, and I enjoyed the thought of what you could see sitting during preaching, that you could see through the open area and into the back part of the lake and into the back part of the partial mountain. My son, Keith Hart, had a great idea. As you open the windows from St. Mark's here, you can look down the end of the lake and see the beautiful white cross that he put there some 8 or 10 years ago. Yeah. Services are held here during our festival. My grandchildren have been baptized in this, had several weddings. One stipulation of having a wedding at Hart Square is the preacher and also the bride and the groom have to dress up in the early 1800s attire. We've had several couples come here from Appalachian at graduation and get married here. Cass Ballinger, our congressman from North Carolina several years back, his daughter got married in this particular chapel. Also on the back wall you see a lighting and an early snuffer, and on both sides of the altar, real early 1800s hand-forged candlesticks. Interesting, as you come in also on the back, it looks like an ironing board. It's probably 7 or 8 feet in height. It's a body board used to bring in people's bodies during services after their death. By the organ, you'll see a handkerchief doll. These were, and this is an early one, if Granny brought in her grandchild during the services and she got really uncomfortable or squiggly or started crying, she'd pull out a handkerchief and make a handkerchief doll to pacify her. Also, throughout the village, you'll see as you enter the door, either on the left or right, there will be handouts which go into full detail of this church, who lived in it, when it was moved, and activities of church life in the 1800s. Under the early Bible on your right as you come in is a nice early 1800 candle box full of the early candles that would be used during their services. By the 2 deacon benches on each side of each wall, you'll notice a little stand with a cross where you see the chalice and wine cup that you would have found in the early 1800s. And they're both early and made of pewter. Processional cross was made here. It's on the wall, made of poplar. We used poplar logs and trees to form the arches and these roof supports, and also the communion rails and the entrance to the altar. As a senior at Wofford College, all my friends had jobs in Yellowstone, and I didn't write in early enough to get a job, so had decided I would like to ride with them to see if I could find a job also. And so I bought an old 1949 Ford, and 6 of us in that little coupe Ford traveled toward Yellowstone. And my father had been a park ranger at Mesa Verde National Park for several years during his summer studies at the University of Colorado as a naturalist, and still had kept in touch with several park rangers that had stayed in the Park Service. So one of his best friends was the Grand Teton, so he tried calling him, see if he could help me get a job, but he wasn't there. So on a piece of paper he wrote down, if there's any way to help Bob get a job, I would appreciate it. And when I got there, he said, how would you like to be a park ranger? And that paid about $300 or $400 a month. I had a uniform, and I stopped speeders. I had a boat to check licenses, and there were just 2 of us at Colter Bay there in the Tetons, and as long as one guy was on 12 hours, the next guy was off 12 hours, so it gave me every other day there. And all my friends had jobs in Yellowstone for $100 a month, and they were really hard jobs, doing housekeeping and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how it got started. And so a lot of my friends would come down from Yellowstone to the Tetons and not have a ride back. And it was really neat that I could find some elderly couple doing 45 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, which was a straight road, stop them with a siren and say, look, I wasn't worried about speeding, I just need a ride for these 2 young girls going back to Yellowstone if you just drop them off at the gate there, because they were right in the middle where they lived. And I'd always say, I'd be glad to do that, Ranger, I'd be glad to do that. So it was a fantastic year that in the Tetons.